Hello, this is Brian.
And this is Stephanie.
Welcome to the making and the remaking of a codependent mind.
It's been a while.
It has. It's been a long while since we've actually done a full episode like this. Our previous episode, we did a little bit of a wrap-up of the book, Me, You, and Us. But and when we did, we talked about how we may start a new season here.
Yeah, and this is going to kind of be ad hoc as subjects come up in our relationship, in our lives, that we feel we haven't adequately covered.
Right, so it's not going to be this every 2-week thing or anything like that.
This is going to be the appendix season.
Yes, season 9, appendix.
These are the appendices to the books and the podcast. And we had originally thought that we would start with rewriting stories because that has been such an important part of the healing process, the reconstruction process, the repair process in our relationship. So we wanted to talk more about the mechanics of that and to give some more examples of how that can work.
And how it continues to work. I mean, it's still something that I and we do. I mean, it's not just something we did, way back when we remade the mind.
But we realized before we did that we wanted to talk a little bit more about shame.
Shame makes it really difficult to rewrite stories. If it's not recognized as shame, most of all, but then also if one is not equipped to deal with the shame when it's felt. We've talked about it before a couple times. I mean, I think maybe at least 2 episodes we've done on shame, but it's been a long time. One of them was in the first season, I think. And then we mentioned shame throughout the books, but we want to kind of take a closer look on how do we know we're feeling it and what to do about it.
And you recently had a pretty intense shame experience.
I did.
And we'll talk a little bit about that. But just to reiterate what we did say, I think you're right. In the first season, we had an episode called Shame. And so just to talk about what it is, like we did then, it's an extremely painful emotion.
I'd say one of the worst.
Yes.
If not the worst, yeah.
I would agree. And we want to distinguish it from other painful emotions like regret. I wish I hadn't done that. And that can be very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt, feeling that you violated some social contract or rule or law, and you feel some guilt for doing that you're going to be caught and punished. And then embarrassment, also painful.
Yeah.
Can be very painful. That you feel that you've been exposed somehow publicly in a way that is not flattering to yourself. Is it, whether it's embarrassing performance or embarrassed about some aspect of your person.
Sure, your appearance or whatever. Yeah.
So shame kind of rolls all those up together. Captures everything, captures all of those. You can be feeling all of those things and it kind of snowballs into shame.
So shame, it's a feeling of not just that you have done something wrong, but that you are wrong. Like you're not worthy of society.
So that's the intensification of these painful emotions. It becomes attached to it can become attached to who you are almost. Mm-hmm. So it's often accompanied by feelings of smallness, of inadequacy, of powerlessness. So it's an intensely negative judgment of yourself. And again, very painful. So in terms of thinking about the second book where we talked about relationship tools, and some of them were emotions like jealousy, also a painful emotion. We wanted to approach shame from the perspective of what kind of work is it doing in relationships? What is it there for? Like, why do we feel this intensely painful emotion, which can be sometimes crippling?
Right, but it is a feeling. And like all other feelings, there is a utility to it. It's there for a reason. So it can be used. It
can be used productively.
Productively, exactly, yeah. In the book, we talk about how there being 3 different categories of relationship work and sometimes, a certain tool could be all 3 or more one than others. And just to recap, those are, there's the knowledge and understanding of yourself, of the other person, or of the us, of the relationship. There's the strengthening of the partnership, kind of the working as a team, feeling as though you're a team. And then there's the work of staying connected, like the feeling of closeness.
I think that in terms of shame, where shame comes in productively is strengthening the partnership. Because if we think of a relationship or a web of relationships, a team or a community, if one person in that relationship or community doesn't feel shame, we probably don't want to be connected to that person.
Right. So like you've heard people say like, oh, that person has no shame or something, like that.
That's a negative thing.
It is. Right. Because
that doesn't,
that doesn't mean like you need to feel shame or something, but you need to be able to feel shame. We all feel it. And if you don't, then that's not a useful thing. It's kind of like not feeling pain.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting analogy, right? Because, you can think of people who don't feel pain. I don't know. I learned about this, I think, in my psychology 101 class or something, that there are people who don't feel pain, right? The wiring in their brain is malfunctioning such that they don't receive pain signals. And that's, originally that sounds great.
Yeah. Like, wow, that'd be nice.
Physical pain. But is all actually quite dangerous because they don't get the signals from the world that they need to get to protect themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It actually sounds kind of terrifying when you think about like going through your entire day not knowing if you've stubbed your toe or something.
I think we can think of shame as a signal that protects relationships and people's place in communities. Because again, we don't want to be in a relationship with someone who's shameless, who is incapable of judging themselves, honestly. Mm-hmm. Because occasionally we all do things that are shameful in that they betray ourselves or they betray each other. And when we do those things, we need to be ashamed of them so that we don't do them again.
Yeah, and that's the tool. It's not like we have to then take that a step further and then commit ourselves, like damn ourselves for the rest of eternity because of anything, but we just need to be able to have that signal.
Right.
I did something wrong there.
So it's like the pain signal. You touch a hot stove, it feels terrible, and you learn not to do it again. So ideally, that's what happens with shame. You do something that you're ashamed of. I've done things that I'm ashamed of, and it's a very bad feeling when I reflect on them. And it's motivating to not do those things again.
Right, yeah. And it's wanting to not feel shame again is just as good of a motivation as any, except that it's also because we want to be in a strong relationship with either our partner or with anyone that we want to be close to.
So if you were to constantly lie to me, which you kind of did,
yeah,
and not feel ashamed of that, then I don't want to be in a relationship with you. Like, you're not a trustworthy person, right? You can't trust someone who cannot evaluate their own behavior.
Right. And that was a risk in our earlier days because in ways I didn't feel shame for lying because I lied so well that I didn't even know I was doing it.
So shame can do the work of helping us strengthen the partnership because it's a clear demonstration of trustworthiness, the ability to judge yourself and to understand what behavior is shameful. It may not be like wrong in a legal sense or in a social contract sense, but you understand that it's betraying either your own values or the values of the relationship. So being able to feel that, recognize, take in that signal and modify your behavior strengthens the partnership. Absolutely. So what goes wrong? I mean, why is shame such a huge problem for so many people? For you, and I suspect most of our listeners, all of our listeners, starts in a childhood where your needs were not being met.
So shame becomes a chronic problem really early to where it's internalized and kind of exploded out to being more attached to the person as opposed to behaviors like we're talking about here. And I remember that very clearly, just like I just knew there was something wrong with me. And there was always some kind of obstacle, and it had to do with because of who I was, how inadequate I was, whatever it was.
How weak you were, how powerless. So you were not treated well because there was something wrong with you.
Yeah, right.
That shame becomes internalized. And you mentioned kind of chronic shame. So we're going to borrow the C from CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and describe this as, this kind of chronic or complex shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
That becomes, like you just said, it's not about anything you've particularly done. It's something inherent in you that you yourself are bad, inadequate, worthy of contempt. That feeling becomes internalized as a child. And
alongside that, it becomes habitual, just like all the other habits we've talked about in this podcast and the books, where it's kind of a go-to response. It was for me, a go-to response. Instead of feeling the functional version of shame, say when I do something wrong, I kind of just immediately fold it into this whole system of I am a shameful person. So I just can't even look at the behavior.
Complex or chronic, again, because any time you were mistreated, you took that as evidence, whether it's neglect or abuse or rejection, you took that as evidence that shameful feeling was correct, that was somehow true about you.
Right. Even if I had moments of like, this behavior isn't good, that the other person, that this isn't right, that the way this person is treated, I still had the shame. I was still like, but it's because of me still.
If I was different, I wouldn't be here, or they wouldn't be treating me better.
And there's nothing I can do about it. That's the other big piece of this.
Which is really what is so crippling about complex shame. Because once it's internalized, if it's about you, well, yeah, what can you do? There's no way out, right? Like, you are who you are. If it becomes this feeling where you're just born in a shameful state, which, by the way, some religions make you feel this way. I mean, some people, and then some parents will try to make their children feel this way. There's the active piece of that as well that comes from the culture where children are shamed for who they are. And adults as well. People are actively shamed for who they are.
Right. And they have no control over that. So what are you going to do? Like, this is who I am, and I'm being told this is shameful. So there's no way out.
It's this kind of black hole.
We were talking about this recently too, and you said something about being weak, the idea of being weak being a shameful thing somehow. So if you deem yourself, or if society deems you in some way of being weak for some reason, like say you're just not smart at something or whatever, you're weak in some way, that is shameful. And if this is just some permanent thing about you, then you are permanently shameful because of that weakness. And I had lots of those.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about how shame feels for you. I mean, we all feel it, but I think people who have grappled with chronic or complex shame maybe have a difficult time in identifying because it's just been so persistent in their life.
Yeah, for sure. Because, and now since I don't feel it as often, when I do feel it, I don't always spot it immediately. But, and when I do, it'll have a similar feeling as it used to always feel. And I go, wow, I used to always feel like that. Oh, wait, I'm feeling shame. And so, the way it often feels for me is this it depends on the situation. If I'm with someone else or near someone else, or another person is in my mind, like a specific person, it'll feel a little bit like an out-of-body experience where I'm sort of floating and looking at myself and just seeing myself as small, just like kind of this unworthy like thing that doesn't really belong there in that space in that particular moment. Like I just remember having, sitting next to you or lying next to you or something like that, and then just feeling tiny somehow, like you felt like powerful and righteous or something, and I felt inadequate, just small and unworthy. So, but it's a feeling in a body. Like so that's the thing. If I'm not aware that it's shame, that's what it feels like, right? And then there's also when I'm not around anyone, it often comes out as just sort of this extreme feeling of like fatigue, depression, which I've had throughout my life also, which has been sustained at various periods, like very severe depression. And if I feel that in a particular day, because, we all have off days or off hours or whatever, where we just feel kind of crappy or whatever. But if I find myself feeling like extremely bad in a particular moment, then historically I go, oh boy, my depression's acting up again. Nowadays, it's like if I'm feeling extremely bad, it's shame. That's exactly what I'm feeling. And I need to stop and take a step back and go, why am I feeling shame? I mean, I 100% of the time, that's exactly what it is.
Feeling really bad, really depressed. Like we're talking about despair, hopelessness, those feelings.
Yes. So it's kind of like beyond powerlessness. It's like I'm done sort of feeling. Like there's nothing I can do. I'm screwed.
Almost a dread.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't feel it that often, but I have felt it a few times still, like it's not like I'm immune to this. And this is the habitual feeling of shame. Those are the moments when I take a signal that could be just shame. And if I was aware of it, and we'll talk about what I've done when I am able to be aware of it, when I fall into the habitual feeling of it, and then I allow myself to get kind of encompassed by it and wallow in it, that's when it's so useless, beyond useless to myself and to you and to anyone.
So again, it's not like I've not done shameful things and I felt ashamed, but I think from my childhood that involved mostly getting my needs met. So I have a backstop. And the backstop is that I do feel like I'm a good person because we are all good people. Like maybe the good's not the right word. We're all worthy people. Like everyone deserves care and respect. And that people didn't get that is terrible, such that they develop the sense that they're not worth care and respect. I have that backstop that I feel I am worth care and respect. My own, at the very least. So when I do something that makes me feel ashamed of myself. It means that I am a person worthy of respect, and I just did something that is not worthy of respect.
Yeah, that's great.
And it still feels really crappy because I don't want to judge myself and find myself wanting. It's really, it feels bad for sure, but I have that backstop. So it doesn't get internalized and doesn't become this kind of chronic, habitual, paralyzing emotion that you experience.
And what you're describing right there is exactly the work that I had to learn how to do. But I had to first learn how to feel it.
Well, and then that's the problem. If you're just carrying around this kind of complex shame, your baseline is, I'm not a person worthy of care and respect. I can't give that to myself. I repeatedly come across people who don't give it to me. Then you can't take on any other shame that just will come about by interacting with people and being in relationships. You're going to do something that you should be ashamed of. Because we're not perfect people all the time. You're going to mess up and hurt somebody or lie to somebody or let somebody down, like doing something that's not kind of shameful behavior. But if you are already full to the brim, if your shame cup is full to the brim, then you are not going to be able to look at that behavior without it just messing everything up.
We've called it capacity before in the past. I love that image of capacity because in those earlier days when we first started this work, I had very, very little capacity. So doing shame work was so hard because I couldn't really handle much.
You couldn't handle any judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So if I would even ask a question that would imply a judgment, like, why were you with Jay? Like, you couldn't handle that because you had so much shame around that. You couldn't look honestly at that and give me an answer. It's a real problem being in relationships if you are full to the brim of shame because you are one of these people who you're not. It's not that you're shameless. It's that you're full of shame.
Shame overflowed.
So you cannot have a discussion about your behavior without falling into, well, we've talked about before, the shame and blame cycle.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Too many things become off limits. Whole topics and there's all these non-starters where then now you being the recipient of someone like me that is at capacity goes like, well, shoot, the last time I brought that up, like you went into a shame spiral and then you felt the need or whatever, maybe in the earlier days to pull me out of it. But yeah, so this brings us to the shame and blame cycle that I do far less often than I used to, but it still happens. I mean, this is again, kind of like the habitual nature of shame. Sometimes if I don't recognize it quickly enough, then it's like that's one of the oldest tricks. And
it's not just you. We've experienced this with other people as well, where there's some sort of judgment. It could even just be implied or a potential judgment.
Yeah, right. Reminded of shame.
It triggers this complex shame, and the person, well, let's say it's you, will either go into a shame spiral. Oh, yes. Okay, why were you with Jay? Oh, I guess I'm just a loser. I don't deserve anything better. Why you even with me? Blah, blah, blah.
Sure,
right? So shame spiral, right? Or alternatively, or not even alternatively, like sometimes it's just like on the heels of the shame spiral because you can't sit in shame. No. Then you're blaming, right? Then you're lashing out in however form you lash out, whether that's resentment. Oh, like, how dare that person ask that? Like, who does she think she is? Asking me these questions, making me feel this way.
Why is she attacking me?
She's the bad person, right? Like, so then or the universe. Like, why does this always happen to me? Like, I do everything right. Everyone else gets things I don't have. So it either has to be, oh, it's all me, I'm terrible, or it's none of it's me. And again, the problem in relationships, I mean, that's just a problem in general. Like, because first of all, the other types of work that needs to be in relationships, if you can't look at your own behavior and how you move through the world, well, you're not going to know yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, if you think of looking at yourself means confronting the fact that you're a loser, then you're never going to look at yourself honestly, right? Mm-hmm. And then also it makes it very hard to stay connected. If you're pulling away into shame, what you're doing is pulling away from that person, or you can be actively kind of attacking that person through the blame cycle and pushing them away.
Yeah.
The one thing you're not doing is talking about the behavior.
Yeah, right. You're not being honest. You're not connecting. You're not having a dialogue about what you're actually should be having a dialogue in that moment about. Instead, it's now become this volley And it's often goes back and forth within the same, like you said, it's like walking this line, rather than going up the middle to have the actual conversation and connection and looking at the actual behavior, you're walking this fine line where it teeters in one direction, and one moment I'm shame spiraling, and the next moment I'm blaming you for that shame spiral. Like I remember doing that so much in those earlier days. And I remember we had this one line that we both remembered from those earlier days where we were having a really particular difficult conversation. And I went into one of these where I said, well, I guess I'm just bad at relationships.
Yes.
So, all right, well.
Right. And you were visibly in a shame spiral, right? I mean, you had that kind of freeze face. You were just like, because it's painful. Like you were in unemotional pain, right? And so, but like, what am I going to do with that?
Yeah, right.
So now, and what I did very often is now I'm comforting you. Mm-hmm. Now I'm reassuring you. Rather than talk about the behavior that was confusing or hurtful to me and understanding where that behavior was coming from, now we're just Stephanie's caretaking Brian mode. Mm-hmm. So you're like free pass, right?
Yeah, I know, right. And then the conversation's over. That's it. Now we're just doing that.
And then, to make it even worse, to pile on the shame, then you would go like, talk about me behind my back about oh yeah, Stephanie had this big explosion.
Right.
Made me feel really bad. It's like, so that's not, it's very damaging. It's not only damaging to oneself to be constantly just going through this, like, I'm terrible, I'm a loser, I'm no good. It just makes connected relationships really, really difficult.
Just to add one more thing, sometimes I think it's shame and blame at the same time. Like when I think about this particular statement that we just made, I guess I'm just bad at relationships. Sometimes those types of statements can be both at the same time. Like I might be feeling a whole bunch of shame and thinking, yep, that's it. I'm powerless. I suck. I'm terrible at relationships. But also at the same time, I'm kind of manipulating you, and I'm kind of feeling bad about the way you made me feel this shame, like simultaneously. And I also want to say that, and I say it that way to get you to tell me I'm not.
You feel angry at me. Yeah. But you can't be angry at me. Right,
because I'm ashamed.
So you're resentful, which is the anger of the powerless.
Yeah, what a mess. Like none of that is useful.
It's not useful.
Yeah.
And this is why processing some of this shame, developing the capacity to look at it and to heal it if it's complex, habituated shame, really needs to be done before rewriting stories can happen. Because what we're looking for in the stories is not judgment. I mean, we're not going back through your childhood to figure out if you were a crappy person or an okay person. You are an okay person. Like we were going back in your childhood, not to assign blame, not even to your parents or to G or even really to or J, even though there was, shameful behavior on all the parts, but we didn't go back to assign blame. It either had to be them or you, right?
Yes.
It's either you were shameful and deserved it, or they were awful and they should be punished for it. It was, the most important thing was to understand, to get to the truth of the situation, to be able to move forward. Mm-hmm. That's the point of the rewriting stories. But again, if you're stuck in the shame and blame cycle because you're carrying all of this kind of complex chronic shame, then
you just can't get very far in those stories. Yeah, there were so many stories that I rewrote several times, the same story, because of that. Because each time I would still kind of hit a wall. I would get a little further maybe than the previous time and then hit another wall.
And there was this shame wall. It's like, I can't feel that. Like that's going to make me feel shame.
Mm-hmm. And so I hit that wall, and then now the rest of it's kind of created out of this different space, this different headspace.
So we've done this major rewrite recently. Well, why don't you take over?
We've talked through so much of this stuff already in the past while working on the podcast and the books and all that. But throughout all that, there was this phone that we found dated back to during the relationship with Jay. So we plugged it in, took forever. It managed to start up and charge. And there's my old text history. And email history and everything all the way back to day one of the relationship with Jay.
It was about the first year and a half, right?
Yeah, and then it's like new phone, whatever, like, and then it ended. But that's a lot. It was a lot, and so I just saw like the very last text, and it was like it felt like I just pulled it out of the oven and it burned my hand or something, and I was like, oh God, I can't look at that. No way, And then over the course of the next, 5 years or something, this I don't know how long. Well, no, I guess
3 years,
maybe 3 years.
4 years, yeah.
Well, basically, I found it right before we started the podcast, and all through the podcast and both books, I just did not want to touch that thing. Like I just didn't. I was like, what's the point? I mean, I'm just kind of coming up with these rationalizations, but I had shame for it.
Well, yeah. So it was this little like shame bomb.
Yeah,
it was
a
in
shame
your
bomb.
nice side
Like,
table.
what's going to be in there? Like, I don't want any kind of confirmation that I ever felt anything other than what I feel right now for that person. Like, I don't want to see myself saying, I love you. I don't want to see myself saying anything other than what I feel now. And I don't want to see how that looked the day to day and everything, I didn't want to see her abuse either, because I remembered lots of things, obviously, like kind of from a higher level, that there was a lot of abuse in text. So I knew those would all be there. And it's like, I'll look at that at some point. I'm not going to throw this thing away. I'm not going to delete it or anything, but I'll look at it at some point. But I just could not get myself to do it.
And it didn't feel good to me that we were hauling this thing around. And neither of us knew what was on it. And which, just gave it unnecessary power, because it's like, well, why is he afraid of it? We're going to learn something that's going to
like upend
what's it going to
everything?
change? Yeah. So I mean, I kind of talked to you about that. Yeah, I just felt you were giving too much power, and I guess it was the same thing. It's like you're not willing to do the hard work and look at this phone, so that both of us can be reassured that you have processed what you needed to process and understand what you need to understand about that relationship.
Which is really too bad, because I did so much work on shame that I was starting to get shame from that fear. So I knew that I was afraid of the phone, but I didn't really fully admit why I was afraid of the phone. And so basically what I would tell myself is just like, I don't need to see it. I know it's there. I don't really, like, I'm just going to put myself through that. Why? Like, what's the point? But that was all excuses. I felt fear as I was making those excuses. So I knew that it was shame. I was afraid of shame. And I knew if I read all that stuff, I would just feel an intense amount of shame.
Well, you read it.
I read it. I went all the way back and I scrolled through the entire thing.
Yep.
And logged a lot of stuff and absorbed it, read it again, absorbed it. And there were, some things, there were some of the timelines and various things were a little different than I remembered. But all in all, it confirmed mostly what I remembered. But it was very, very difficult. Yeah, very painful to relive this stuff in a totally different way. Like, it was really going down to the nitty-gritty, day by day, hour by hour, which I really wasn't doing when we did the podcast and all that.
And you had kind of rewritten some of those stories to protect yourself from the shame of how you actually behaved.
Right.
And the way that you behaved was to betray yourself.
It was a betrayal of myself. Yeah, that was, and that's what I think was this invisible thing that I was afraid of, was just to see that it's too bad that I didn't know that's what it was going in. Because maybe I would have been more prepared for it, because that's kind of the type of shame that I got used to dealing with. But really not, though. This gave us a whole new angle. This going through that phone and all this is, once again, just like we've said so many times, working through the podcast and working through the two books, this has been another whole angle and learning experience.
So how did you deal with that shame?
There were days there where I felt really, really bad. It was that despair feeling where I just woke up and I was like, I guess I just got to pick up this phone again and start going through it, even though I feel terrible. And just all day, just feeling as though I am there, like I am as worthless as I was then or something. So already putting myself back into a powerlessness position, as if I were powerless then, which I wasn't. But I was in this terrible spot with this terrible person and not understanding what was going on. But I was almost making myself powerless again by re-experiencing the pain as if I couldn't do anything about it. So I pulled myself out of it partially a couple of times, and then finally really named that it was shame.
And that helped.
And that helped immensely. Because, I still felt terrible. But when I realized it was shame, I was like, wait, I've done so much work with shame. I know how to handle it. I know what I've done before that works, which is exactly the stuff that you said earlier, which is you have this kind of gatekeeper that keeps you from going into this low place where you're basically taking it on and absorbing it as an inescapable part of your personality, or the toxic shame. And so I found myself feeling toxic shame just because I was going through this phone, even though this stuff was from years ago or whatever. And this isn't how I even behave anymore. So it wasn't that difficult for me to do that very basic work of going, I'm not there anymore. I don't identify with that behavior anymore. I don't identify with that relationship. I know how it happened even. I know how I got started. I know her behaviors. I know how that all worked. I know that it was a trauma bond. I learned so many things about this. I don't need to be ashamed of that. I can regret it. I lost some time. I lost some other relationships.
You can be you can be embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
Super
embarrassing.
Not your best moments.
No. Yeah, seeing myself saying like honey poops or whatever, to like this person in these moments where obviously I was just trying to get her to not abuse me and stuff like that. It's just so gross. So many moments that just felt gross to me.
But again, the result was very, I think, empowering.
It was super empowering. That's exactly the right word for it. Because now it lost its power. This phone that I was afraid of, for that, until that moment, I still every morning woke up and saw this. I mean, like I had this phone sitting there on because I was afraid something would happen to it. So, I wanted to make sure I read the whole thing. And so I just get up and see this phone glowing there. I'm like, oof. Ugh. But when I did this work and realized it was shame and did this work, it lost its power. It lost that power. And, still gross, whatever, still doesn't feel good, still embarrassing, still some regrets and all of that. But those are more manageable emotions anyway. There's no reason to carry shame. So there's a lot of individual shameful behaviors. I understand all those. And a lot of those I had already processed. I don't need to like re-experience shame for the same thing I've already like understood and moved on from.
And the power that comes from being able to feel shame is also the knowledge that you are a worthwhile person. That's why you're feeling it. If you were shameless, then that's the problem.
Right. So it gave you hope. It gave me hope. Like it in a way, it felt good that I was ashamed of what I was ashamed of. Not in the way, so it's like it didn't feel good when I was just kind of this blanket ashamed and not even knowing it was shame and I'm just depressed basically. But yeah, no, it's like, oh yeah, no, I should have felt bad for that. But
yeah,
okay.
I did something that was really harmful to myself. I went against my values and my desires and treated myself poorly.
Yeah, again and again, every day for years.
Yeah, that's shameful behavior. That doesn't mean you're a shameful person and
right.
that you need to get stuck in that. And so the way you described it, I think it's great that you were just able to separate yourself from the actions. I mean, that's really critical. It's behavior that is shameful, not people.
Yep. Even these awful people, like everyone could figure things out and turn themselves around, you know?
Mm-hmm. But the lesson there as well is that it is painful and it's hard work. There's just no way around that.
Yeah.
But it feels so much better on the other side of it.
It does. Yeah. There's so much that goes with it. Not only did I resolve the shame that I was carrying, that I was still carrying for so much of this period, I have this momentum. Like, wow, I got through that.
Nothing can take me down.
I know. Seriously, I think I can get through any sort of shame.
It's like a runner's high, right?
Yeah. And then to go back to the relationship work it does, the team feeling. It did that for both of us. It strengthened our partnership because I did that work and that we did that work and we talked about it and
Absolutely.
We spent weeks talking about this.
Absolutely, because the same thing. It made me feel like we're strong, like we can take it, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're afraid of this phone again, then I'm afraid of this phone, and then it's like, well, what? We can't handle it as a couple. You looking through this phone?
I know why. Like, what's going on here? Yeah.
So it was. Yeah, I'm really appreciative that you did that work. It really made a difference, and which is in part why we wanted to do this episode is just to reinforce to people that if they're carrying a lot of complex shame, there is a path forward. Mm-hmm. They can lay it down.
Yeah,
they can get through it, right?
Yep.
But recognizing that that's what they're feeling, as you said, is probably the first step. Mm-hmm. And getting some help. I mean, we did talk during this period, and
yes, I wasn't just completely alone. Like,
right.
You weren't like.
And I was able to reinforce those messages that you were trying to give yourself. Like, this is not you. This is not who you are.
So like you said, this is necessary work to not this like linear thing where it's like, okay, you have to be perfect at handling shame before you rewrite your stories or whatever. But like you need to know that you have this tool, that you can use this tool, that you can recognize shame, that you can face it, that you can allow yourself to sit with it and learn from it and resolve it.
And so that might be the next one.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, I mean, I still really like the idea of doing an episode on that. So
yeah, me too. And But we have a couple other appendices that we think we might want to cover in the near future, and we hope you'll join us for that.
Thank you.